Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public session of the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Halton District School Board on January 21st, 2025. I hope everyone is enjoying this first month of the new year. Let's begin. Please be advised that the meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed on the hdsb.ca and on the HDSB YouTube channel. We have trustees both in person. Nobody's joined online. In the room, we have Trustee Bryden, Chair Collard, Trustee Daniele, Trustee Zhang, and Trustee Gray. And we have regrets from Trustees Amos, Baxter, Shuttleworth, and Rocha. And Associate Director Salmini, can you please tell us which of the staff are in attendance tonight?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm the Director's Designate tonight, and we have Manager Khan and General Manager Francie here to support the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, tonight, Jean will be honoring the land.
We begin by acknowledging the land and our responsibility to care for and respect all that provides us with life. This land upon which the HDSB is situated is on the ancestral treaty and title lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Michizagig Nation, now known as the Mississaugas of the Credit. Michizagig territory in the past and present continues to host both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. The HDSB is committed to continuous knowledge building with respect to actions that address and resolve the ongoing impacts of colonialism. We do this by learning and understanding the true history, treating obligations, duties and responsibilities, and Indigenous rights while actively maintaining mutually beneficial relationships and collectively respecting and caring for the land.
Thank you. And as this is a Committee of the Whole meeting, we'll be using our first names. So Donna, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda?
Thank you. Yes, I would.
Okay, I'll put the question on the floor. Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Okay, seeing none, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. On to declarations of possible conflict of interest. In relation to our agenda this evening, are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item 3.0, and that's the consent agenda. There we have for approval the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting from November 26, 2024. I'll put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the board approve the consent agenda action items as listed on the January 21st, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda. Robbie, would you like to move the motion to deal with the consent agenda?
I would.
Thank you. Does this item need to be pulled for discussion? No. Okay, as there are no objections, are there any objections to approving the consent agenda? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved by unanimous consent, and we will move on to item 4.0, discussion items. And there we have policies and governance procedures. Under that category, we have first up is the school naming and renaming policy and governance procedure. You have received, copies are attached in your agenda, and I'll pass it on to Policy, Bylaw, and Governance Standing Committee for the introduction to this item.
Thank you. I will defer to Amy on this one to share what has changed since the last time this policy and governance procedure came to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you very much. Yes, we going to start with the policy, and we have very small changes to the policy. You will note under 2.1C, the phrasing has been changed as it has under D. And at the bottom, the change is the name of the administrative procedure has been changed to be similar to the name of the policy and governance procedure so that people will easily recognize that they belong together. If there are any questions on the policy, please let me know.
Are there any questions for Amy or the committee on the policy? Okay, Jean.
I just want to check, multi-year plan. I'm reading up there, it says multi-year strategic plan. Should that word be in there?
Where in the document are you finding that word?
Under part 2.1, part D.
We inserted the word strategic just in the latest iteration. I'm sure that it's not an issue to put the word strategic in there now. Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Any other questions or comments around the policy? And I'll note that Naveed has joined the meeting virtually. Okay, Jean?
Yeah, this is just maybe a grammatical thing or a preference, if you would. 2.1 point F. If you look at 2.1, it says proposed school names must, F reads, must be words in English. Should it be really, should it say something like must use words in English? Or are you all right with the word be? I just find that awkward somehow. That jumped out today.
I would agree that it's awkward, but it's not wrong. If we wanted to worry about the language there, I'm sure we could make a change before it comes to board. I think the reason why it's worded that way is because there are two languages that, or two groups of languages that are specified there, one being English and the other being any indigenous language. And I think that's why the phrasing is the way it is. But it's still clear that it needs to be words that are either in English or an indigenous language. Mm-hmm. We can look at that and make a change before the next, or not make a change before the next meeting.
And my second question on that very same line, and I know that we are not a French school board. However, in Canada, we have two official languages. And I'm wondering if we are remiss in not adding the word French on this line.
That discussion took place a few years ago. I'm going to say in the last term when we were reviewing this policy. As you might remember, we reviewed it for the entire 4 years of that term. And people felt awkward about having French words in there because we are not a French language board. We offer French immersion, but we are not a French language board. And the feeling of the majority of trustees at that time was that it should be English or any indigenous language.
I think it just gives a little bit of level of discomfort now when we're trying to be so inclusionary. It just seems like we're skipping one whole part of our country's language system. But anyway, I don't want to debate this. I just point that out as something that I find a little bit awkward.
Well, since this is a more relaxed atmosphere, if anyone else wanted to speak to whether or not we should include French, we could have a bit of a discussion about that before moving on. If no one else wants to speak, that's fine. Oh.
Robbie, go ahead.
Thanks for raising that point, Jean. It's I found myself reacting in a pinball manner. On the one hand, going, yeah, inherently, I support that position that we welcome French into our schools, and then kind of rebounding to the other side of going, if we name a school in French, given that we have two French language boards that cover our area as well, are we perhaps providing a message that we don't intend to provide about what board this school is situated within. So that was my one hesitation about considering a French language school beyond a name, which is permissible under this policy.
Okay, Shani?
Thank you. This is just for the wording, the clarity, because the language, we have the spoken language and the written language. So if we just say the language, for example, the indigenous language, I'm not sure if this is practical, because if we say this is written in indigenous language, then we have no way to type using a normal keyboard, or people cannot read it even. So does it mean we need to use some Romanized the words to represent the indigenous language, like Mississauga, Mississauga? So that's when we may make it clear in this policy. Thank you.
Okay, to move on? Okay. All right, thank you for those comments. Are there any other? Nope. All right, then we will move on to the governance procedure.
And on the governance procedure, as you can see, we've cleaned up the document considerably to reduce some of the confusion, because a lot of things were struck out and there was a lot of different colors on the page. So the major changes since the last iteration, you'll find under 4.1.1 and 4.1.2, where the clarity around what happens if the motion passes or fails to include the shortlisted names. And seeing no hands flying in the air, if that's okay, I'm going to move on to 7.2. This is a more extensive change because it deals directly with requests to review a school name.
Sorry, Amy. I do have a question about section 6, 6.1. Let me just think of what my question was. I think my question was around if there is a tie, then the director gets to randomly select out of a box or whatever that one of the two names, and then that name goes forward for a vote. Correct?
That name becomes the shortlisted name, and then there will be a vote on naming the school that name.
Okay. And if that name doesn't pass in the vote, then will the other name that was in direct competition with that name be put forward? Okay.
Yes, it does say that in 6.2.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
So
I just had a question before we move on to number 7, if I may. Sorry, I'm going all the way back to 2.1. In 2.1, it says that there will be 3 to 5 schools as part of the shortlist. Then in 4.1.1, I just need clarification of this. This is when the chair states the shortlisted names and will move that all names be considered, and that the trustee for them to do that. If this is the part I don't understand. If the motion passes with or without amendment, my question is, could at this point, let's say the chair brings forward this short list of 5 names, could the motion be amended to, at this point, by trustees to eliminate one of the 5 names?
absolutely.
That's what I thought I was reading there. So, that brings up my next question. Do we, let's say the list of short list that came from the chair was only 3 big. And if at the 4.1.1 part, let's say if we kicked one of the names to the curb, then we have only 2 names to look at. But our under 2.1, it says that, the short list for consideration should be 3 to 5 schools. Is that a problem?
That's not a problem. They've all been considered and one was eliminated out of hand.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't get into, following it
No.
and that we're okay.
The short list just needs to be proposed by the director. It doesn't need to be fully accepted.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else before we get to section 7.2?
Yes, I have a question. So just to understand how this will play out, the short list will be brought forward at the first board meeting or committee of the whole meeting. At either of those, when their list is brought forward, there can be discussion, correct? At that point, a name can be eliminated from a short list. What if all the names on the short list are not something that the trustees want to put forward?
None of the names get eliminated at the review of the short list, only on the nomination of the short list, and that's at a board meeting, not at a committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, so discussion can take place, but it has to come to board and it has to go to a vote, and that's the means by which we can ask for a new short list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm getting, oh, I see. Oh, I am doing this wrong. Sorry, I'm making a mess of things on the screen. I'm going to go down to 7.2. I'm going to read it out. It's not that long, and I hope by reading it out it becomes clear. Requests for a school name review should be accompanied by a rationale for the request and address the following. 1. Is the school named after a person whose actions or legacy is seen to be a significant departure from current societal norms? Or 2. Was the current school name appropriated from a culture or community without appropriate consultation, recognition, or consent? Or 3. Is the current school name out of alignment with the guiding principles set out in the school naming and renaming policy? So it can be any of those 3 items that will allow the director to believe that this should proceed. In 7.3, the significant change there is that it previously just said the director will acknowledge receipt. Now it says within 1 week of receipt, the director will acknowledge. There had been a suggestion that the requester's name be shared with trustees, and that has been removed after some legal consideration of how that might play out. Now, the next section is the one that has the most circuit to it. I'll put it that way. Assessment of requests to review a school name. So you'll see that there are 3 major sections, 8.1.1, 8.1.2, and 8.1.3. And each of those follows a different path. So the first thing that happens is that the chair, the vice chair, and the trustee for the school will determine if the request meets the criteria as outlined in the director's recommendation. If they determine that the request does not meet those criteria, the chair will ask the director to notify the requester that the review of the school's name will not proceed and provide rationale of this decision. And the chair shall notify trustees via email that the review of the school's name will not proceed and provide the rationale. So that one's pretty simple. The next one, the chair, vice chair, and the trustee for the school may determine that the request does meet the criteria. And in that case, the chair, vice chair, and trustee for the school will bring forward a report to the board with the details on the school renaming request, providing the rationale for determining that the request does meet the criteria and outlining the options as in the next steps. And so if the board determines that the request does not meet the criteria, the director shall notify the requester via email, as in the preceding one. If the board determines that the request does meet the criteria, then the board may approve a resolution to initiate a renaming process, which will proceed in accordance with the way that we name a school. And the third instance is if the board determines that the request requires further investigation. And the director will at that point embark on an investigation and provide a report to the board with all of those items that are listed below. Once the director presents the information to the board may then approve a resolution to initiate a renaming or determine not to proceed with a renaming. So there are three paths that can be taken there, and they all kind of read similar, but they all have differences to them in the path because of where in the point the decisions are being made. And we needed to make that clear so that at any point we know what pathway we're using, and that added a lot of clarity to it. I know it sounds repetitive, but it added a lot of clarity.
Okay, Donna, you have a question?
I have two questions, actually. The chair, vice chair, and the trustee for the school. I think that is a great start. I'm wondering why the director has no place in this is my first question. And then my second question is, what if the chair and vice chair don't agree with the trustee for the school? Is there a hierarchy? Does it have to be unanimous? Is it best 2 out of 3? Rock, paper, scissors? I'm not quite sure. I'm one of those ones, I always think of what could go wrong and try to mitigate it ahead of time.
You can add to that, but I want to answer the question first. If they didn't agree, then it would not be a unanimous decision, and therefore it would go to the board, and the board would decide whether or not to proceed. Because prima facie means that the chair, the vice chair, and the trustee for the school believe one or the other, and they don't in that case if it's not unanimous.
Perhaps that needs to be spelled out. As a university-educated woman, I didn't know what that meant. So, like I said, I think it needs to be clear that it either needs to be unanimous or it's 2 out of 3, or that's just a little weakly point for me. And again, I am unsure as to why the director has no place in something like this, given that he is responsible for the operations of the schools.
The reason why the director is not included in this is because this is a governance decision being made. It's a political decision.
And I'll just add to that, I can see the benefit of having 3 individuals, so chair, vice chair, trustee for the school. But what if the trustee for the school is a vice chair or chair?
It wasn't about having 3 so much as it was making sure the right people were being consulted. This was specifically to include the trustee for the school. And if the trustee for the school happens to be the chair or the vice chair, then it's about having those voices at the table, not about it's not about 3 or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Jean?
Yes, thank you. So I'm into 8.1.2 and I'm following all of this. And I'm thinking I'm going to be one of those people in 8.1.2.2 if the board determines that the request, so as a trustee on that board determine the request does not meet the criteria, I'm thinking helpful to me to make that decision would be a lot of what you've listed in 8.1.2.4. There's a lot of information there that would be material to my decision that this didn't match the criteria. But I'm just wondering if am I ahead of myself on that one?
No, it's just that comes further because that's where it has not been so obvious that we need to do an investigation. So that occurs because we as the 3 or 2 people making the decision saying yes, this needs to go forward, or no, this does not need to go forward, have looked at it and been fairly certain that one or the other of those responses was the way to go, and they were bringing it to trustees just to have more. And perhaps Robbie has something to add.
This is a particularly weird circumstance where the small group has said, yes, this needs to be changed. It's come to board. Something has happened at the board table, and the board has gone, no, this does not need to be changed. Don't even need to investigate it further. Thank you for your report, but no, this doesn't need to be changed, and it's going right back to the requester as is. We're not even doing a further investigation. So that's the pathway we're on. I would expect that to be extraordinarily rare when you had this level of disagreement between the small group and the board as a whole. More likely is that you would proceed to 8.1.2.4, where the board says, yeah, tell us, let's look at this, and then we'll dive deeper into that.
A good example of that would have been when we had one of our schools named after Ryerson. And it was a very quick decision that school needed to be renamed. There was no dispute that name should have been changed. Whereas with the debate that we had regarding Iroquois Ridge, that was a significant debate, and that is part of the reason why now the trustee for the school is included in that decision-making process. And Donna was quite right. Before, it used to be the director making that decision, and now it's always trustees making the decision. So a little bit more in the political realm.
All right, the last point under 8.1.2.4 speaks about an estimate of one-time cost associated with renaming the school. And I appreciate that that's something that we want to be aware of and consider. But if we determine that school name needs to be changed, really the one-time cost is more of a, like, we're aware of it, we understand what it's going to cost us, but it doesn't play into the decision making, correct?
I would think it should not be a deciding factor, but it in the age I'm not getting the word right. To be transparent with the public about the cost of this is also very important because we are spending public dollars. And I think as trustees, we don't want to be spending public dollars without the public being aware of it.
If I could just add, that became, the cost became very, very important in the Ethel Gardner community.
Yeah.
It was a big blow up about how it was going to cost so much money to add the first name to the school and changing it from Gardner Public School to Ethel Gardner.
And that finishes it. I think that's the fastest we've gotten through naming and renaming. So I hope that when we bring this to board, we will have included the word strategic. We will be re-looking at the words be words in English, and we will include that piece about unanimity between the chair, vice chair, and trustee for the school. And I thank you very much for your diligence on reviewing this.
All right, thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item 4.1.2, and that's introduction of a style guide, and over to Carolina.
Thank you. Through you, Joanna. So this is just a quick item, just to communicate to trustees that I will be looking at perhaps offering or creating a resource that will act as a style guide for the governance document. So policies, governance, procedures, and hopefully this will be useful, because I know in recent months, or in the last few months, there's often a lot of comments around sort of stylistic preferences and things like that. So hopefully we can all land in a good place. There's somewhere where we can agree, and then that will be the guide and the rules that are applied to our documents, your documents going forward. And so just as a heads up that I may be reaching out to you to get your feedback, or as those things progress, and then going to the perhaps the new PB&G committee to review some of those things before it comes back to the broader group. So I'm happy to take any questions, but just as an FYI that this will be work that will be starting soon.
Okay, and I see Robbie's on the list.
Thanks, Carolina. That's much appreciated. Would that also be intended to apply to APs?
Great question. Yes, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense if there was consistency all across, for sure.
Any other questions for Carolina on this topic? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much, Carolina. And we'll move on to the next item, and that's the school year calendar with Tina, please.
Thank you. Through you, Joanna. You have before you the proposed school year calendar for the 2025-2026 school year. It's here for you to review. It will be coming back on February 4th for approval. I want to thank the committee. Appendix A of the report lists the number of people, different stakeholders that were involved in the calendar committee. So I'd like to thank them for their work on this, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Robbie.
Thanks. I note that the structure of the calendar follows this year's calendar virtually identically. The one question I have, and my apologies if this was asked last year, there is one Monday elementary day in January. All the rest are on Fridays. What is the rationale for that one Monday PA day? January 26th.
Thank you for the question. There was a desire to have some Mondays and some Fridays if possible, so that it wasn't always on a Friday. So that's probably the reason that we've left it there as we had this year as well.
All right, Amy.
Thank you. I'm wondering, does our calendar align with the Catholic Board's calendar?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, I was in consultation several times with my counterpart in the Halton Catholic Board. We work really hard to make sure that we're aligned because of the transportation costs. It's quite costly if we're not aligned on the same day. So she's presenting the same thing this evening.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments to Tina? Seeing none, we will move on to item 5.0, and that's committee updates. And the first is the Board Self-Assessment Committee. So I will just report to you that following last November's Committee of the Whole meeting, the Board Self-Assessment Committee had analyzed the results of the survey and devised a plan for moving forward. The survey asked trustees questions around 7 key focus areas, and that's strategic focus, trustee role, trustee as board member, trustee fiduciary role, board processes, community relations, and areas for improvement. And so following tonight's Committee of the Whole, we will engage in a professional development session dedicated to discussing 3 of those areas, focusing on strategic focus, trustee role, and trustee fiduciary responsibility. And that's it. Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to an update from Policy, Bylaw, and Governance Committee, and that's Robbie.
Thank you. PB&G, which sounds so much like PB&J, met earlier in the month and has laid out a meeting schedule for the balance of the school year, meeting roughly every 3 weeks on typically on Fridays at noon, with one exception. Monday, January 27th, we will be meeting at noon, Fridays at 12:30. This committee is at our minimum number, so it is available to be joined if there is any additional interest in participating in that committee. We have sent out requests as of this evening to each of the superintendents and the associate director who have responsibility for policies that are due for review this year, either saying, we think this policy can come straight to Committee of the Whole, or this might be helpful to come to PB&G before it goes to Committee of the Whole. Would you be willing to meet with us? In a departure from past practice, we will be circulating agendas to all trustees ahead of our meetings, so that if there are items of particular interest, you are welcome to attend. I will note to trustees that the standard agenda, you will need the calendar invite to participate in the meeting. If otherwise, in the standard agenda, you just have the dial-in number where you are an observer and I cannot bring you into the meeting. So you'll have to ask us and we will happily send you a calendar invite.
Thank you. That sounds like a great improvement to the process and more inclusive, and makes it possible for other trustees to participate. So thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments? Robbie?
Sorry, I should note, for the public as well, those agendas are posted on the board website 48 hours in advance of every meeting. They are there and available. This is just to facilitate trustees being aware of what's going on.
Any questions or comments for Robbie? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to an update from the trustees' professional development planning, and that's Naveed.
Thank you, Vice Chair, through you. We haven't had our first meeting so far, but we're planning to have very soon. And once we have our first meeting and we plan out things, I will be here giving more update. So thank you for now.
Thank you. And finally, Financial Advocacy Committee. That's our new standing committee. And as the new chair for this committee, I'm happy to present a brief update. Committee members sorted out who will be the chair and secretary, and meeting dates are being considered. Topics for the agenda will include revisiting and updating the fair funding for HDSB website, which is available on the HDSB website under the chair's correspondence. And we'll be looking at opportunities to communicate with the HDSB community and other education stakeholders, and keeping our provincial partners and municipal leaders aware of funding and budgetary issues. So lots of interesting work ahead of us. Are there any questions for this committee? Okay, and so we're ready to proceed to item 6.0, and that's trustee questions of clarification for this agenda tonight. Are there any such questions? Okay, no. Trustee news for Committee of the Whole. Jean?
Yeah, earlier tonight I had a chance to talk to Vice Chair Oliver about some training that I took part in late this afternoon on suspension and expulsion. And out of that training, it was suggested that we may, as a committee, and this is particularly of import perhaps for Trustee Ahmed, but that we undertake as a Board of Trustees some further training in suspension and expulsion and possibly using one of the legal consults that we use and a person by the name of Nadia who actually has just completed earlier this past fall training all of the principals and vice principals. So the notion that we would have a 45-minute session with Nadia, that Superintendent Fowler would pay for that training, and that we could have a 15-minute Q&A afterwards might be something for our group to consider. And I think the sooner we would make any commitment in that area, then Superintendent Fowler is happy to set it up for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. That sounds like a really great opportunity and an opportunity for the PD committee to look into and help to collaborate. Questions or comments? Shani?
Hey, this is an update from the PIC. The conference notification has been sent to the HDSB parents. So the parents, this is the time to register for the meeting. And this conference, we have lunch. And this year, the lunch menu, we have updated how to put the different category based on community members' religious accommodation. So we get some comments and feedback. So we update the way. If the community member have some other comments, so just give us feedback. We can improve that for the next year. Also, this year, the change is we have a school bus. So if you register, also don't forget to register the school bus from which we have a school bus from the 4 cities. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that's the Parent Involvement Committee. And has the date been set, Shani?
Oh, the date is February 8th in Milton.
Okay, February 8th. And so parents and guardians can sign up for their lunch, and if they need transportation for the bus, that will take them to the site. Okay, and it's in Milton, sorry?
Yes, it's Elsie McGill.
Okay, Elsie McGill, February 8th. Thank you very much. Amy.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on to Jean's suggestion about having the suspension and expulsion training. I would hate to see that money coming from Superintendent Fowler's budget when we have our own budget for PD. And I would suggest that we bring forward a motion that should be paid for through our own PD account from prior term reserve.
That's a great idea, Amy. Okay. Any other trustee news? All right, seeing none, the agenda has now been exhausted. It is 6:47 p.m. and I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.